Dr. Agata Mazurkiewicz is an accomplished assistant professor at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, where she specializes in political science and international relations. With a PhD earned with distinction from the same university, Dr. Mazurkiewicz researches focus on civil-military cooperation in various contexts, particularly in NATO peacekeeping operations. Her educational background includes a master's degree in international relations and a bachelor's degree in the same field, both from Jagiellonian University. In addition to her academic achievements, Dr. Mazurkiewicz has intensified experience as a lecturer and a supervisor in the field of national security, having taught a wide range of courses at both the university and military training levels. She has also been involved in various international projects and workshops, further demonstrating her commitment to research and education in political science. With such a distinguished academic background and a wealth of experience in national security studies, Dr. Mazurkiewicz's expertise in civil-military cooperation makes her a valuable contributor to the field of political science. Through her research and insights, Dr. Mazurkiewicz offers a unique perspective that promises to enrich our understanding of contemporary security challenges. So, let's look at you, Agata, for sharing your insights and your expertise on this important topic for us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this introduction, for these very kind words, and also for the invitation to participate in this panel. The CCOE holds a very special role in my heart and in my research, so thank you very, very much. And today, with my parts, my speech here, I would like to offer a slightly zoomed out perspective into the topic that we are discussing, so civil protection, or indeed the role of civilians in deterrence and defense. And I will particularly focus here on NATO frontline states. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the so-called NATO frontline states are those countries which are NATO member states and border either Russia and or Ukraine, and also share this perception of Russia as an existential threat and Russia's aggression in Ukraine as the very strong wake-up call. In fact, so in my research, and in this introduction, I will say a couple of words, sentences about the research itself. In my research, I focused on on the ways these NATO frontline states view security. So here we have two maybe generalized approaches to what security can be and how it can be understood and defined by various countries. And the one, without going into very strong details, because I'm sure this is also self-explanatory, one of these approaches is much more comprehensive. So in a comprehensive approach to security, we recognize that security involves multiple dimensions: military, political, economic, social, health, and environment. So there are those multiple domains, and they require multiple actors to participate in provision of security, and also multiple different tools that can be used in order to increase security. And then on the other hand, and on the other maybe side of the spectrum, we have the hard power and militarized security. So a very traditional point of view in which security concerns itself with a threat from another state, and this particular threat is largely military. So we also use the armed forces as the main tool of providing security. The armed forces are the main tool responsible also for providing security. So in my research, I looked at those several NATO member states, and in this presentation I will discuss three particular case studies. And I looked at their security strategies or security concepts. So basically the main document which reflects the vision of security that these countries have, and also define the responsibility, assign the responsibility for security in the state, what requires protection, so what is the referent object of security. Within this presentation, I would like to address mainly two questions here. So the first, what kind of security do these countries project, and what role is assigned to civilians in their deterrence and defense schemes, and then also what are the ways in which civilians can participate in the provision of security. So the discussion will be based on strategic documents. For each country, I've selected a strategic document from before 2014 as this one of the key moments in which the security environment significantly changed in our part of the world, and then the latest iteration of security strategy. And the funding for the project was kindly provided by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of UK as part of the Peace Rep Ukraine platform. So let me move to the first case study. Next slide, please. And the first case study is Romania. So we can see two documents, two main documents showing security or showing insights into security culture of Romania. In 2007, the document basically directly referred to the ideas of comprehensive approach. So we have this both internal and external dimension. We have a rather broad vision of what threats there are to security. And we also have this idea of the whole of government approach, really. So we need multiple tools, multiple dimensions to be applied in order to increase security. Here, in particular, in 2007, back in 2007, it was mainly about homeland security and also crisis management. The document also directly recognizes the necessity to cooperate. So this necessity of cooperation between military and non-military actors, primarily in terms of homeland, which might be also interpreted as public security. That was still back in 2007. So, for example, it refers to such concept as counterterrorism, right, in which multiple actors need to be involved in order to increase security in that dimension and repel the threats. So we have, for example, intelligence services, we have diplomats, we have politicians, but we also have armed forces as one of the actors who are to be involved in the provision of security. But then when you look at the document itself and ask yourself the question, so where is the place of civilians? What is the role of the citizens, of the population in the whole security scheme of Romania back in 2007? You will see that civilians in the society, the population in general, are framed more as a referent object. So basically an object that requires protection and that requires assistance, that is at the center of the state and therefore needs to be protected from all the threats and risks to security. So 2007 in Romanian strategy, civilians, the population, the citizens are not an active provider of security, but are rather passive. Their role is envisioned in a rather passive way. The next document, the Romanian National Defense Strategy 2020-2024, also refers to the general assumptions of comprehensive approach, as I said. So the broad idea, the broad definition of security. We have multiple actors, we have multiple measures that are needed. In fact, there is a direct reference to multidimensional security, which shows us quite a broad approach. It also, the document also acknowledges the need for multifaceted cooperation, including civil and military, to strengthen resilience. And resilience here is understood both as resilience of the society, but also of the critical infrastructure. So that was also part of the previous presentation. So, for example, the civilian society, in order to be resilient, needs electricity, let's say, right, needs access to healthcare. So these things need to be protected in order to increase resilience of the society. The document also emphasizes the importance of interinstitutional cooperation in defense itself, but also does not really provide any direct links or suggestions of how the military and non-military actors are to be linked. So it does not really offer any framework in which the civil-military cooperation, tangible framework in which it happens. So basically, still within this model, civilians and the general society are framed more as a referent object. So they are at the heart of security. They need to be protected, but they are not really in any direct way engaged in provision of security, other than their own resilience, other than their awareness of threats and disinformation that was also mentioned in previous presentations. So basically, this is the model of civilian involvement in security or in deterrence and defense, in which civilians are more passive, take on a more passive role, and are treated as a referent object of security, so an object that requires protection. Next slide, please. Next case study and next very strongly model, I can say, is, for example, can be seen in Estonian discourse and strategic concepts. And here we also have two documents. And you will see very soon that it is very, very different perspective and very different outlook on not necessarily on security as such, but on the provision of security itself and the role of civilians. So in 2010, the national security concept, it directly refers to comprehensive approach and the idea of comprehensive or total defense. So the whole vision of what security is, how it should be achieved, and it very strongly emphasizes the involvement of all sectors of the society. So while in the Romanian case, we had a more declarative vision of comprehensiveness, right? But civilian at the center needing protection. Here we have strong emphasis on involvement of all sectors of the society, and civil society is treated as an important component of the enhancement of national security. So not only is treated as part of it, there is some importance assigned to it. The 2010 national security concept also refer to deterrence and defense directly, which involves all state structures, including military and the population. So not only military and civilian actors in terms of, let's say, authorities, right? The administration, in terms of critical infrastructure, providers and services, in terms of public services like police or intelligence, but also the population itself is mentioned as part of the deterrence and defense effort. And resilience and psychological defiance are also treated as elements of the national defense system. Now, this approach, this outlook on security and the role of civilians in security was even strengthened in the latest iteration of the national security concept published in 2023. And here we have this direct quote from the document, which says that based on Estonia's comprehensive national defense concept, the defense of the nation and preparations for it draw on all available military and non-military capabilities and resources, involving also the public, private, and third sector. And this is particularly important in the light of what comes next, which basically says that all those various domains of state and society, whether it is public, whether it is societal, so basically population, whether it is military, economic, internal, external, they are not only interlinked and mutually supportive, but they are of equal value. So not only within the Estonian, the second model would say, of the approach to civilians' role in deterrence and defense, not only they are actively involved in deterrence and defense schemes and in provision of security, but they are treated as equally valuable and equally important for the entire effort. So this was our second model and second kind of outlook on this topic. Let's move to the third slide. And the third slide discusses the case study of Poland, which is also quite interesting because it is something in between to a certain extent. So let's look at the documents. 2014, we have our national security strategy, which also reflects the general assumptions of comprehensive approach. This approach was mainstreamed very strongly through NATO and through peacekeeping approach and comprehensive approach used in peacekeeping. So of course, it also found its way into strategies of all these countries. So we have a very broad definition of national security. We have the assumption that different actors must play a role in increasing national security. In this case, it is more slightly closer to the Romanian case. So basically more reliant on whole of government approach in which we have the armed forces, we have the politicians, we have diplomacy, we have the economic sector, but it all kind of fits into this idea of the government and the institutions involved in national security. Then we also have this recognition of the internal external security nexus with both threats that are kind of crossing the borders, for example, terrorism, but also the need of international cooperation and international solutions to these problems. But in terms of deterrence and defense, what this strategy directly says is that the societal and economic systems are subservient to the armed forces. So the armed forces are the main actor providing security, are the most important actor. And well, obviously, society and the whole economy of the country are important, but they are supportive. So they are contributing to the success of armed forces in terms of deterrence and defense. Now, an interesting thing happened in 2020 in our latest iteration of the National Security Strategy, which again emphasizes the comprehensiveness of security. We have this broad idea of the definition and tools and measures that need to be applied. But also the 2020 National Security Strategy in Poland announces the necessity to build a system of comprehensive defense, which is, and I quote here, based on the effort of the whole nation. So basically, we are starting to have this idea that the entire nation should contribute to the provision of security in one way or another. At the same time, the armed forces are discussed separately in a separate chapter of the strategy. But what is interesting in this particular case is that the societal economic subsystems are no longer framed as support to the defense subsystem. So the society and the national economy or the economy of the country are no longer treated as support systems for the armed forces. Still, what is very characteristically, I would say, Polish twist, what we have here is also the establishment of the territorial defense forces. And for those of you who might not know, this is a fifth branch of Polish armed forces established in 2017, which consists of both professional full-time soldiers and soldiers which are doing a special type of military service in part-time. So very often they have a civilian job throughout the week, and then at least once per month they conduct their military service as soldiers, as treated as normal soldiers. So this can be treated in a way as an attempt of bringing the military and non-military subsystems closer together, and in some way involving civilians also in deterrence and defense, but through military means. Also in our National Security Strategy, the 2020 edition, it is straightforwardly written that the readiness to defend and the basically civil defense effort will be developed through the territorial defense forces. So to some extent, we have this element of involving the civil society in provision of security, but through a military service. Next slide, please. Thank you. So basically, as you can see, based on these three case studies, we can distinguish three different visions or three different models of how civilian actors are involved in terms of deterrence and defense and what their role in the deterrence and defense scheme is. So we have the first model in which the population, the citizens, are basically treated as passive referent objects. They require protection, they require assistance, and they are not directly viewed as an actor who is involved in provision of security. Then we have, on the other hand, on the other part of the spectrum, we have the model in which civilians in the population are active. They are active providers of security. They are treated as an element of the whole framework that has equal importance to the armed forces and need to contribute and is responsible for contribution to security of the country. And then, of course, as it usually is the case with the spectrum, we have something in between. For example, as reflected in the Polish case, in which we do have this realization that the society should be involved in provision of security. We are also right now undergoing some reforms in that regard, so we will see what direction that goes. But so far, right now, it goes through the military means, so through a military service, even if it is a special type of military service. Now, how does that tie back to our discussion that we've been having about protection of civilians? So Civic actually, one of our hosts here today, In 2023, they published a really great report, the Self-Protection in Practice, Ukrainian Efforts to Avoid Harm During the Russian Invasion. And I will try to post a link in the chat right now. I've said it to someone, I hope you can all see this. I definitely recommend this report. One of the parts in the report, it says, and actually Alexander at the very beginning of this meeting confirmed that civilians have agency during crisis and regularly make decisions or act in ways that mitigate the threat of physical harms to themselves and to their communities. So as Alexander said, civilians are not just victims, they have actual agency, right? I believe this is also a very important element to look at how various states, what kind of frameworks and structures offer to their citizens, basically, to involve them in the provision of security. So as you can see, we have those three models in one. We don't really have many frameworks or many solutions, so citizens are treated as without agency, rather passive. But still, there are some frameworks for civilian participation in security, and I'm pretty sure that throughout the questions and answers, we can come up with other, solutions, good practices, maybe also bad practices, lessons learned from different countries. So as you can see, in Poland, we have the Territorial Defense Forces. So far, there is a discussion on the reform, and we'll see how that goes, in which civilian participation in security is militarized, so happens through the military service. When you look at Estonia, we have the Defense League. There is the Defense League, which is a paramilitary organization. And then there is also the Women's Voluntary Defense Organization, which offers two, and if there are Estonians here in the room, they will surely correct me if I say something wrong, but there are two options available. So one is indeed paramilitary participation, in which women are taught how to use the gun and participate in like more kinetic way in potential deterrence and defense, deterrence and potential defense. But then there is also this non-kinetic way of involvement. So what we are seeing here, and this is something that I actually attribute to one of my Estonian colleagues, Tia, who said that basically what we are seeing is certain level of defensification or militarization of resilience and civil defense in many of the countries, in which all the frameworks that are available are either paramilitary or, as in case of Poland, fully militarized. So the question is, and this is my professional opinion, shouldn't we have some non-militarized modes of civilian participation in security? As we could see, as Alexander said, civilians do have agency during conflict. They do apply different strategies for self-protection. And the question is, shouldn't the state or other organizations, shouldn't they provide some way of becoming involved in that? And to conclude, I will just also mention one other thing in the report that I linked, and hopefully you have access to it, in the civic report. One of the striking moments, many striking moments, but one of them, those that stopped me in my tracks and kind of forced me to reflect, was a moment in which the respondents talked about how they froze after they found out about the full-scale invasion. They froze. They had this moment in which they didn't know how to act, how to behave, what to do, whether to evacuate, and like what do they need, right? And when you go to the Estonian Women's Voluntary Defense Organization's website and click on the English translation, there is this little passage. I'm not going to say the exact words how they go, but it goes something like this. If there is some sort of crisis, and it also provides examples of non-military crisis, right? So there's a flood, there is a snowstorm, there is some sort of huge like blackout or something like that. Wouldn't it be nice to have someone who knows what to do? Wouldn't it be good to have someone on your street or in your village who knows how to behave in this situation? And Women's Voluntary Defense Organization is supposed to be something like that. I will stop here, and I would very gladly discuss with you, with both the speakers and the audience, good and bad practices, different solutions for non-militarized modes of civilian participation in security.